welcome everyone to the ICEJ webinar series. I'm David Parsons, one of the vice presidents here at the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem. And we're so glad that you've joined us from all over the world. And we have a very hot topic for this week's program, the crisis in U.S.-Israel relations, of course, referring to the UN Security Council resolution this week, which the U.S. decided not to veto. It allowed it to pass by abstaining, and it called for a ceasefire without conditioning on the release of Israel's hostages. And it's just the latest in a series of steps of growing tensions between the Netanyahu government here, the emergency unity government here in Israel, and the Biden administration in Washington. And here to help sort this out, just how bad this crisis is, where it might go, how we got here, we have Ambassador Danny Ayalon. He served as former deputy foreign minister for Israel, as a member of Knesset, and of course 4 years, 2002 through 2006, as Israel's ambassador in Washington. And it's great to have you, Dan.
Thank you, David. It's my pleasure, my honor, and thank you very much, David, and everything that the ICEJ does. We really appreciate it. You really make us stronger, and also make us look better around the world.
Okay, we're here to defend, and we feel we owe Israel and the Jewish people a moral duty to stand with you, especially in light of all the bad things Christians did to the Jews over the centuries. Just a little more background, Danny Ayalon served as a policy advisor to, I think you were close to Prime Minister Ariel Sharon. You were also in a position to serve, to advise Prime Minister Ehud Barak and Benjamin Netanyahu in the past. So you've been in the room when important decisions were made. There were some really critical decisions during your 4 years in Washington. That was at the time of the disengagement. Maybe we'll talk a little about that if we have time. But right now, we've got this building crisis because of scheduling. We're 2 days before this airs. But, you know, Prime Minister Netanyahu, following the U.S. decision to abstain in the Security Council vote that demanded an immediate ceasefire for Ramadan with no condition on releasing hostages, he has canceled a trip of a senior delegation to Washington, and Israel is no longer involved in the Doha talks right now. This is a big crisis, isn't it?
Well, it is, but let me say first that the ground that both the U.S. and Israel walks is very firm. And the U.S.-Israel relationship is strong because we are natural allies, and we are natural allies because our Judeo-Christian values. We are natural allies because we have common interests. We face the same threats, and we want the same things in the world and in the region here in the Middle East as well. And I would say another strong facet for the relationship is the great support we get from the very large American Christian community. And I think one of the most conspicuous, I would say, facts that should be mentioned is that both in the United States and Israel, our two countries have the largest segments, proportion of population that prays, that goes to synagogues and churches every week. So I believe that the future of the relations is good, is solid, because, as I mentioned, it's a natural one, and it's for the benefit of both our people and countries. What we have seen lately at the UN is a little bit unfortunate, because I believe that it is very important for the United States not to leave Israel behind. and to keep supporting Israel and to show the world that Israel is not alone. Because if there is the perception of daylight between Washington and Jerusalem, we see that it stiffens the neck of Hamas and of all the other Islamist neighbors and enemies that we have around. One immediate result from this abstention of vetoing this resolution is maybe the decision of Hamas to go back to their exorbitant demands, which are completely irrational. And this is why the Israeli delegation from Doha is back to regroup and again to signal to Hamas that they will not get their way.
Mm. Yeah, it seems to me that in the back and forth between the Biden administration, I mean, the hot mic moment where he said he's got, got to have a come to Jesus moment with Netanyahu and the different things that have gone on with Kamala Harris and Blinken and others. But Israel also, it seems like both sides are playing a little brinksmanship in the relationship. Israel wants more support. They're saying some of the Biden administration's decisions are really emboldening Hamas, strengthening Hamas. I think you'd agree. That's troubling.
It is troubling. And we do see, in a way, continuation of the Obama administration. Obama was not in his heart a Zionist, or he did not really believe in this Judeo-Christian partnership and the alliance between Israel and the United States. And there was a consequence. He wanted to reach peace here, but when Israel is pushed into the corner, of course, there is no incentive for our enemies, including the Palestinians, to climb down their tree and make the concessions. Israel has always been ready, and we did make concessions, painful ones. And you mentioned, David, in the beginning about the disengagement from Gaza, which now we, in retrospect, may have been a mistake, but we'll have time to discuss it. But in any case, we do expect from the Biden administration to be more favorable to Israel. Biden himself, I think that in his heart of heart, he is more of a Zionist, as he claims himself. But there is an administration which some of them may not see eye to eye, and I think this is hurting both our countries and both our interests.
Yeah. Now, the Biden administration, I mean, they'd like a ceasefire, a truce. They keep saying, we understand why Israel has to keep fighting to get the hostages back and to destroy Hamas, but it's costing a lot of lives, which has caused the Arab countries, they're pressuring Biden. The left wing of the Democratic Party is pressuring Biden. And so it's political maneuvering by him to really try and twist Israel's arm right now.
Yes, and we know, and we are mindful of the very tough political season in the United States, the campaign, which I know is neck to neck, and right now it can fall, any side. We don't know that. We do appreciate and we do need a bipartisan support. We get great support from the Republican Party, and we know a great deal of this is because our best friends, the evangelical community, we would like to see the Democrats see eye to eye, because at the end of the day, it is American interests and it shouldn't be a partisan. And here we will have to walk a fine line, because Israel should not be put in this unenviable position where we are in the midst of, let's say, fire, the line of fire between Democrats and Republicans, like there is in every democratic country. But one thing is the dismantling of the Hamas is an imperative. And by the way, President Biden himself said from the outset that the dismantling of Hamas is also an American interest. We have to remember that Hamas is at the top of the list of the United States, Congress and the State Department list of terrorist group, and Hamas is right up there. Secondly, after the savagery of the 7th of October, this is the moral and the right thing to do. And also, I think from the perspective of calming the situation down in the region, the only way to do it is we do away with Hamas. Because if, God forbid, we do not dismantle Hamas, this will be the cue for Hezbollah, for the Houthis, for the Shia militias in Iran, in Sudan, and in Syria, for Iran itself to continue and stir up and continue and plan attacks. I think former Secretary of State Pompeo said it best. He says, when you have a fire, you don't extinguish just 80% of the fire. And the 20% that we need to finish is in Rafah. And this is why Israel will have to go into Rafah.
Yeah, I know from my time in Washington, I was registered to lobby with Congress for strong U.S.-Israel relations back in the early 90s for 4 years. And I found it fairly easy to distinguish between a principled supporter of Israel, which is Pompeo. Back then, John Kyle, we had quite a few good friends in both parties, Daniel Inouye and on the Democrats. And then there were political supporters of Israel. They saw good politics in it. And I think Biden squarely fits in that latter category.
Yes, yes. And we would really very much like to see good old America going to the basic values that bind us together. And I'm very hopeful because I know that the American people are resilient and always they do the right thing. You know, even the great Churchill back in the World War II, when he tried to persuade President Roosevelt at the time to join the war against the Nazis, against the evil. And at the end, of course, the US saved the day by joining and defeating the evil of the Nazism and of the Imperial Japan in the Pacific. And Churchill said that the US always does the right things, but after trying everything else before. I hope that this will not take too long when the US will come squarely to where it should be. The moral leadership, the US is the greatest democracy ever. And I hope that it will continue its rightful place at the head of the Judeo-Christian alliance, the Western civilization countries together, because today, unfortunately, we see evil actually sprouting, whether it's from the Ayatollahs in Iran, whether it's the evil empire again of Russia, as Ronald Reagan coined it first, and whether it's China, whether it's North Korea. So we must gather together and have no daylight between countries like Israel and the United States.
Yeah, this whole formation of what's called BRICS with Brazil and India and China and Russia and the Saudis and all, it's kind of like the Kremlin and Beijing are using this conflict to really test the waters whether they can break down the U.S. centrality in the world order right now.
Oh, absolutely. And they don't make any camouflage about it. They say it outright, Chinese and the Russians, that they would like to replace the United States. They would like to marginalize the United States and Western countries. They would like to have their way. What is their way? It's what I would say dictatorship. It's no human rights. It's no Christian or Jewish values. It's everything that we just abhor, that everything that can really risk the future of this planet and of humankind. with BRICS, they even try to compete with the US dollar. The BRICS countries, which are Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. This group is trying to actually mint their own currency and to start trading with their currency against the US dollar. I don't think that they will succeed because, as I mentioned, the US resilience will always come through. The real grit and the real faith of the American people will always prevail.
Yeah, there's a very foreboding photo I've just seen on one of the news sites here in Israel of some of those BRICS leaders, the Chinese ambassador, the Russian ambassador, some of the others huddling around the Palestinian observer there at the UN Security Council right after the vote, to discussing how to use it to start getting sanctions on Israel. I mean, this is a real challenge to the U.S.-led world order since World War II, certainly.
Yeah, and the UN has never been a friendly arena for the United States, nor for Israel, nor for most Western countries, because of the automatic majority of the non-democratic countries. Out of the 193 member states in the United Nations, about 2/3 are not democratic. And if you look at there is what we call the Arab automatic majority. You have 22 Arab countries, which are part and parcel of a bigger group, which is called the OIC, which is the Organization of Islamic Countries. And they are, again, a part of what used to be the non-aligned group, or the less developed countries. So you're talking about maybe 120 countries that the Palestinians and the Iranians would have their votes in their pockets, even before any decision is coming to the table. So it is a kangaroo court, and so far it's been the United States. Sometimes the UK is joining it to be the only real stop against this bias and discrimination at the United Nations.
Yeah, you'd think the United States would value its relation with Israel more with this global challenge to its leadership. But this is a real test for what we always called the pro-Israel consensus in Congress. You have half the Democratic Party now that's anti-Israel. They're not the traditional Judeo-Christian values that you've talked about here. It's a real test for the Jewish community itself because it's been so wedded to the Democratic Party and progressive politics, the Jewish establishment in the U.S. And now they're being forced to choose which is more important, the Jewish state of Israel or leftist politics. This is a difficult position even for the American Jewish community.
Oh, absolutely. It's a watershed moment, and I hope that the Jewish community of America will actually rise to the task and will do the right things. And traditionally, they were always voting one way as almost one bloc. I think it is time for them to really wake up and to do the right things. And they should understand that the state of Israel, which is really the embodiment of our prophets, of our prophecy, is a unique thing in the annals of history. It has to be preserved. It has to be strengthened. And this is, as I mentioned, a crucial moment, and that's where the priority should be set right. And the priority should be, I think, for every decent human being in the world, certainly Christian or Jew, is to strengthen Israel.
Yeah. Look, I know that, Netanyahu, when he was young, I want you to help me sort of understand where he is now. when he was younger, he lived in Philadelphia. What his father, Benzion Netanyahu, was a professor at a university there. He went to MIT in Boston. He was served as Israel's ambassador to the UN in New York. So he knows America, and his top advisor, the sort of position, one of the positions you used to be in with especially Ariel Sharon, that his top advisor, Ron Dermer, is an American Jew who made Aliyah, renounced his citizenship. They know America, they know the support for Israel that's there, but they're really, really banking on the Republicans right now and those traditional values you're talking about, where at a time when the Republicans, they don't control the White House, they don't control the Senate, it's close there. And even in the House, they're just a couple seats away from losing that majority with an important election coming up. Are we going to survive this?
I believe so. I believe we will survive this because at the end of the day, we know that our alliance is so embedded in our souls, in our minds, in our rational thinking, and also in our emotions. So I believe that even if there are some, I would say, turns to negative turns, at the end of the day, it will all surface to bind us all together. And I'm sorry that the US today, just like Israel, just like many democratic countries, are so polarized these days, which makes things much more difficult. It's almost, David, is like Satan is trying to, just like in the Tower of Babylon, is trying to pit one against the other. And I think at the end of the day, the godly people will prevail.
America has changed some, and those traditional values, America's changing, and maybe a lot of Israelis don't understand that. And Israel has changed since October 7th. And I don't think Washington really understands that. How can you tell our people, our listeners out there, how much October 7 really changed this nation? Because there does seem, despite the troubles with Washington, it does seem like the nation is still behind this war effort led by Netanyahu right now.
Oh, absolutely. See, the 7th of October, 2023, was the worst day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust. More Jews were just slaughtered this day than any time after 1945. And not only that, but the Hamas is trying desperately to actually surround us with a ring of fire and enemies. And the Hezbollah in the north started right away. We saw the Houthis. And we now understand that with evil, like the Hamas, the radical Islamist evil, there is no coexistence. Unfortunately, it's with them, it's do or die. So this is where the country has pulled together. This is why we are fighting a fierce fight in the south in Gaza. And we see how Hamas turned Gaza to one big bunker with subterranean tunnels, which go as deep as 300 feet. So this is a very, very complex warfare, and I think the IDF is doing marvelously, but they're taking their time, first of all, in order to preserve life of our own soldiers, but also of uninvolved civilians in Gaza. So I wish the world would see what we are doing, because our fight is the free world's fight. And just as we see ISIS and Al-Qaeda and Iran, they are challenging all of our communities around the globe. And this is why we would expect all God-loving, God-fearing democratic countries to support us and let us do the job. We can do the job if we are not interrupted and we have not stopped.
Yeah. I think it's one of the great tragedies of this conflict in this particular moment in world history that neither the UN Security Council nor the General Assembly has condemned Hamas and what they did on October 7. Neither one. And my sense that Israelis would feel the world understands them a little better if that were to happen, and you might get a little change in it. But I don't blame Israel for just keeping on driving in Gaza, because the world doesn't seem to have any sympathy for this nation, no matter what it does. It's really tragic.
And also what's tragic is all the misinformation, all this propaganda of Hamas,
Yes.
which inflates the numbers of those who are killed. And not only that, they do not distinguish between the armed terrorists and not armed terrorists. You know that in every warfare, unfortunately, there is what we call collateral damage. And if you look at the ratio of people who are uninvolved to terrorists in the war against the terrorism in Iraq or in Afghanistan or in Syria, the ratio was much higher than it is in Gaza. Let's say in Mosul or Fallujah, there were like 10 innocent civilians killed for every terrorist. In Gaza, it's only 1-to-1. That's the whole thing. And not only that, in Gaza, we see how the Hamas is using their own population as human shields. And, they're talking about 30,000 deaths in Gaza. About 13,000 are known terrorists that were killed. I suspect that the number is even higher, almost 15,000. So there is no reflection of this in the international media and in capitals around the world. And this is, again, part of the war that the Hamas and the Islamists are waging against Israel, which is the propaganda war, the political war, the PR war. And this is where really we need all our friends to speak up. And here I believe that the Christian community around the world is our best asset to just diffuse all the lies and just to tell the truth.
I hope we can make a difference. I tell you, the more that the world complains about the civilian death toll in Gaza, don't they realize that the international community has a responsibility, that they insisted that the civilian population of Gaza stay in harm's way. They could not flee. Have you ever seen a conflict where the world insisted that the civilians stay on the battlefield? I find it outrageous.
It is outrageous, and it all comes from the very bias where the Palestinians is the tail who wags the dog. And they, because of threats that they make to all the Arab countries, for unrest, and even toppling their regimes. So they have the Arabs who must support them, and the Muslims who must support them. And of course, we have all those nefarious regimes, whether it's in South Africa or North Korea or Iran, and of course, Russia and China. So we are really outnumbered. And but we are not deterred. We have to do what we have to do. And with the help of God, we will prevail.
Yes. If you could advise the Prime Minister of Israel right now, Benjamin Netanyahu, anything that you would do different, how does Israel get out of this current predicament where the Biden administration is really trying to twist their arm?
Well, I think my first advice to Benjamin Netanyahu would be to challenge the administration about Rafah. First of all, they also understand that Hamas has to be dismantled. It's also American interest. And the question is the tactical way to move forward. So I would tell them, listen, the only way to dismantle Hamas is to go into Rafah and to take the remaining battalions that they have. Israel already dismantled 18 battalions, almost 20 now, out of 24. There are 4 battalions which are left in Rafah. And we can do the job and also secure as much as possible the civilian populations by moving them out of harm's way. But I will tell them, if you do not want to see a major operation in Rafah, why don't you and the entire world impress upon Hamas to unconditionally surrender, leave their arms behind, and Israel will guarantee them a safe passage out. I think we can, by that, we can establish or we can accomplish what we want to do. But if you cannot do that the way we suggest, without a major operation, then we have no other choice. But just to give them, the understanding of what's going on and to give them another option to see whether it works or not, maybe this is something that we should consider.
Yeah, I think that's the message that the not only Netanyahu and Defense Minister Gallant, but even Benny Gantz is telling Washington we need to go into Rafah. This war has interrupted what was an historic reconciliation process between Israel and many important players in the Arab world, the Abraham Accords. Do you think that has been so badly damaged now that it can't be picked back up, or will there still be a chance for more reconciliation, especially with the Saudis coming out of this war?
Yeah, David, this is a very good point. And I think that the Hamas and the Iranians, again, have made it not as a secret that one of their objectives was, other than just killing Jews and destroy the state of Israel, was to actually derail any process of reconciliation, as you mentioned, between us and the Arab countries. But so far, they have not succeeded. You see, the peace with Egypt is intact. The same is our peace with Jordan. Also, the Abraham Accords are still holding. So this is very, very important. The only thing that was interrupted was I would say, the very, very beginning of a process with the Saudi Arabians, which just put everything on hold. But here again, the Hamas, which is part of the network of Islamic terrorists like the ISIS or Al-Qaeda, they are mortal enemies of Saudi Arabia. So although they cannot say it outright for obvious reasons, they would very much want to see the demise of Hamas. And once we do that, I'm sure that we will re-engage with the Saudis, because it is also their interest. First of all, they know that with Israel, they can better defend themselves against Iran and also against the terror organizations, as we mentioned. And there is another issue here, which is very important, and that is the technological cooperation. The Middle East, which is short of water, short of food, and with the population growing, with the desertification going, we need to ensure food security and water availability. And this can be done only through technological cooperation. So the Saudis have all the reasons to join force with Israel. And I believe after Hamas is gone, we will resume our talks all the way to a full-fledged relationship.
Okay, as we wind up here, I think we agree that Prime Minister Netanyahu, his main advisor, Ron Dermer, they are banking on Christians and other traditional supporters of Israel in the U.S. to help get them through this crisis. That, things are changing in America, but they're hoping that Biden realizes there's limits to really how much pressure he can put on Israel. I hope we're right on this, Danny, but we'll have to see. Netanyahu did have the experience of going to Washington, making a speech in front of Congress in defiance of President Obama back in 2015. And because he had the Republicans inviting him and supporting him, and they had a strong majority. And that's really what started the Abraham Accords process, in my mind, that here an Israeli leader went and defied an American president on their behalf because they felt threatened by the Iranian nuclear threat, which was the topic of his speech. Let's hope there's something that comes out of this that actually accelerates back the Abraham Accords and gives Israel a new position, a new standing in the region. The deterrence restored. No one's messed with us. Come, let's make peace.
Absolutely, David. And it's important to note that the Abraham Accord came after the United States recognized Jerusalem as the eternal capital of the state of Israel and of the Jewish people. After the U.S. moved its embassy to Jerusalem, I think this was also an act of God, which also brought, at the end of the day, these Arab countries to understand that, we are here to stay. And when we are on the right side of history, everybody will join. So this is why it is so important, I think, for the U.S. and Israel to keep working together. And I would say at the end, David, God bless America and God bless Israel.
Okay. Thank you for your time. Ambassador Danny Ayalon, he's the former Deputy Foreign Minister of Israel, Israel's former ambassador to the U.S. He's been through these knockdowns, dragouts before, and it's good to see that he thinks the relationship is going forward. Thank you, Danny, for your time and your expertise.
Thank you so much, David. Be well.
Okay. Thanks to everyone for joining us on the ICEJ weekly webinar. We'll be back next Thursday at 3 p.m., same time here in Israel time. And at the top of the hour, remember, you can join us for the global prayer gathering, 4 o'clock every day, a daily gathering of Christians from all over the world to pray for Israel and this region as it goes through this crisis and war. Thank you, and God bless you from Jerusalem.
Thank you for joining us for this informative webinar. Be sure to subscribe to our social media channels or visit our website at icej.org for upcoming webinars and more ICEJ exclusive content.